morning sunlight spilled through the small kitchen window, casting a warm glow on the wooden floor. She sat on a tiny stool, her fingers trembling as she pressed down on the piano keys for the first time. The sound that came out was uneven and offbeat, but she didn't care. To her, it was the beginning of something magical. She had always loved the idea of music, the way it could tell a story without words. But today, her classmates didn't see the magic. They saw only mistakes and awkward movements. At school, the girl walked down the hall carrying her piano book tightly against her chest. She could feel the curious eyes following her, whispering among themselves. Some of the students were the same ones who always found ways to point out what was different about her. Maybe it was the way she carefully observed everything before speaking, or maybe it was the quiet determination that shone in her eyes. Either way, she was always a target for laughter. She didn't mind their whispers, though, because her heart was set on learning music. Today she was going to try to play the piano in front of others for the first time, and she hoped they would listen instead of laugh. The classroom was noisy with the chatter of students. She could feel her stomach twist with nervousness as she approached the small corner where the piano stood. The black and white keys gleamed under the fluorescent lights, almost daring her to touch them. She took a deep breath and sat down, her fingers hovering above the keys. The teacher smiled at her encouragement, giving her a nod to start. She pressed the first key and a single note filled the room. It was soft, shaky, and full of uncertainty. Immediately, a few students snickered. One leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, clearly waiting for a disaster. Another whispered to a friend, pointing at her fingers that stumbled over the notes. Her heart sank for a moment, but she quickly reminded herself why she loved music. This wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about expressing herself, about turning thoughts and feelings into sound. She closed her eyes briefly and let her fingers find the keys again, focusing on the melody she had practiced so many times at home. Her fingers moved a little more confidently this time, though still with hesitation. She noticed a boy in the back leaning forward, frowning as if he couldn't believe she could play at all. A few girls giggled quietly, covering their mouths with their hands. She tried not to let it get to her, but the laughter was sharp and uncomfortable, and it made her hands shake. She reminded herself of the nights spent practicing quietly in her room, of the moments when she could make her mother smile by playing a simple tune. That was what mattered. The teasing would not stop her from trying. She continued, pressing one key after another, her eyes occasionally flicking to the teacher for guidance. The teacher gave small, encouraging nods, whispering, "You can do it, just keep going." That simple reassurance made her feel braver. The melody was still rough and full of mistakes, but she could feel the rhythm starting to form, the story she wanted to tell beginning to emerge. She imagined the notes as colors, painting pictures in the air for anyone willing to see. Some students still laughed, but others were starting to listen, perhaps intrigued despite themselves. A boy in the front row leaned back, muttering, "She's going to mess up badly." His confidence was loud enough that others around him giggled in agreement. The girl took a shaky breath and tried to ignore them. She thought about why she loved music, about the tiny moments when a tune she had practiced perfectly at home would make her feel calm and happy. Music had a way of taking her to another place, away from the teasing and whispers. She focused on that feeling and let it guide her fingers. A few notes into the piece, she made a mistake. A wrong key sounded sharp and out of place. Some of the students laughed openly, pointing at her as if that one sound defined her entirely. She froze for a moment, wanting to hide under the piano. Her cheeks burned red, and for a heartbeat she considered quitting, leaving the room and never trying again. But then she remembered the nights spent practicing alone, the pride she had felt when she could finally play the tune without looking at the book. That pride was stronger than the laughter. She pressed the keys again, this time more carefully, letting the music flow despite the mistakes. Slowly, the melody began to take shape. It was still not perfect, but there was a rhythm, a feeling that started to emerge. Her fingers moved with a little more confidence, her heart swelling as the notes became more connected. She realized that the laughter was fading from her mind as she focused on the music. It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. The class was watching, some with curiosity, some still skeptical, but she didn't care about their opinions. She was playing for herself, and for the first time, she felt a sense of accomplishment that was entirely her own. She glanced at the teacher, who smiled warmly and whispered, "Keep going. You're doing wonderfully." That tiny encouragement was like a spark. Her hands moved faster now, more fluidly as the melody she had imagined in her mind began to sound in the room. The laughter had not disappeared entirely, but it was less sharp, less confident. Something in the music was demanding attention. She noticed a few students leaning forward, curious now rather than mocking. That small change gave her hope, and she pressed on, determined to finish the piece no matter what anyone said. By the end of the piece, her hands were slightly trembling, but she had played through the mistakes, creating something that felt like her own. The room was quiet for a moment. Even the students who had laughed were silent, unsure what to say. Her chest rose and fell with the rhythm of her heartbeat, a mix of relief and pride washing over her. The teacher clapped gently, and a few of the quieter students joined in, surprising her with their support. It was not the thunderous applause she had dreamed of, but it was real, and it meant something. As she stood to leave the piano, she felt a strange mix of emotions. Embarrassment because of the laughter, but also joy, because she had tried and completed something that mattered to her. Some of the classmates who had teased her now looked a little uncertain, their laughter gone, replaced by a quiet respect she could feel but not yet see. She walked back to her desk, holding her head high, realizing that the first step was the hardest, but it was also the most important. After class, she returned home and sat at the piano in her living room. This time there was no audience, no whispers, no laughter, just her and the keys. She played the same piece again, and it sounded better than it had at school. Her fingers moved more freely, her confidence growing with each note. She smiled, realizing that the teasing at school had not stopped her from loving music. In fact, it had made her more determined. Music was her world, and she would continue to explore it no matter what anyone said. That evening, as she lay in bed, she thought about the day's events. The laughter had stung, but it hadn't defeated her. She had discovered something important, that the joy of doing what she loved could not be taken away by anyone else's opinions. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a spark of hope. One day, the music that came from her heart might be heard and appreciated by everyone, even those who had laughed at her today. For now, she was content with the small victory of having faced her fears and pressed on, letting the music speak for her when words could not. After the first day at school, she went home feeling both nervous and excited. She had faced laughter and judgment, but she had also discovered something important. She loved music more than anything else. That night, she sat at her piano for hours, replaying the same piece from earlier in class. Her fingers moved more confidently now, remembering each note from the practice she had done at home before. She felt a sense of control and freedom she had never experienced before. Music had become her way of expressing feelings she could not put into words. Her family noticed her focus. Her younger sibling peeked into the room, curious about the sounds. "You're getting really good," they said, eyes wide with admiration. She smiled quietly, feeling a warmth in her chest. Her parents also noticed the change. They saw that her love for music was more than just a hobby. They encouraged her, giving her small tips and cheering her on. This support made her practice sessions feel even more meaningful. It was no longer just about learning notes. It was about pouring her heart into every sound. In the next few weeks, she began dedicating more time to the piano. She discovered the joy of creating melodies herself, trying out small tunes, sometimes cheerful and sometimes sad. She even started keeping a small notebook, writing down ideas and simple rhythms she came up with. Every mistake she made felt like a lesson rather than a failure. Slowly, her fingers became quicker, moving across the keys almost without thinking. The music she played started sounding more like her own voice, full of personality and expression. School, however, remained a challenge. The memory of laughter was still fresh in her mind, and sometimes she hesitated to practice in front of anyone else. At recess, a few students would whisper and giggle, pointing at her when she walked by with her piano book. It hurt, but she found a small comfort in knowing that she could leave those moments behind when she went home and sat at her piano. At home, there was no judgment, no ridicule, just the joy of music and the freedom to create. Her teacher noticed the improvement in her skills and offered extra guidance. After class, they would sit together and explore different techniques, teaching her how to play scales more smoothly and how to read sheet music faster. The teacher also encouraged her to try new pieces, sometimes ones that were more difficult than what she had attempted before. Each new challenge was exciting, even though it came with nerves and hesitation. She found herself loving the process, discovering that persistence and patience brought real growth. One afternoon, her teacher asked if she would like to participate in a small recital that the school was organizing. Her heart skipped a beat. The thought of playing in front of her classmates again made her anxious, but she also felt a spark of excitement. This was an opportunity to show them what she had been working on, to let her music speak for her. She hesitated for a moment, remembering the laughter from before, but then she nodded. Yes, she would try. She wanted to prove to herself at least that she could do it. From that day on, her practice sessions became more focused. She would start with the pieces she already knew, and then move on to the new one for the recital. Her fingers learned the rhythm naturally, memorizing each note through repetition. She learned to listen to the music she played, noticing subtle mistakes and adjusting them. Each day she could feel her confidence growing. She even began imagining the moment she would sit at the piano during the recital, closing her eyes and letting her fingers move freely. At school, a few classmates began noticing the change. Some who had laughed before were now curious, sneaking glances at her piano book or whispering among themselves. She felt a little nervous about their attention, but she also realized that their opinions no longer held the same power over her. Her focus was on the music, on the joy she felt when playing rather than on how others might judge her. She began to understand that true courage meant doing what you love, even when others do not support you. Her parents continued to be her anchor during this time. Her mother would sit and listen patiently while she played, offering quiet encouragement. Her father would tap along with the rhythm sometimes, making her laugh and feel more relaxed. Their support was unwavering, and it gave her the courage to dream bigger. She started imagining what it would feel like if one day people would stop laughing and start listening. That thought became her motivation, pushing her to practice even when it was hard. The night before the recital, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking about all the notes she had to remember and the expressions she wanted to convey. She felt butterflies in her stomach, a mix of excitement and fear. What if she made mistakes? What if people laughed again? But then she remembered all the hours she had spent practicing, the small victories she had achieved on her own, and the feeling of joy that music brought her. She realized that those fears were temporary, but her love for music was permanent. That thought gave her a sense of calm and determination. The morning of the recital, she woke up early and went to the piano. She ran through the piece one last time, her fingers flowing more confidently than ever. She could feel the melody in her heart, guiding her hands effortlessly. Each note seemed to carry a piece of her story, every mistake and every success. She felt ready. When it was time to leave for school, she carried her piano book with pride. She had worked hard, and now it was time to share her journey with others. At school, the students were buzzing with excitement about the recital. Some still remembered the first day she tried to play and laughed, while others were curious to see how much she had improved. The girl felt the same mixture of nerves and excitement, but she focused on the music she loved. She reminded herself that this was her chance, not to prove anything to anyone, but to express herself through the piano. She arrived at the music room where the recital would take place. The piano gleamed under the lights, inviting her to sit. Her classmates took their seats, some whispering, some watching quietly. The teacher gave her a reassuring smile, and she felt a surge of courage. This was her moment. She placed her fingers on the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first few notes were gentle, cautious, but filled with emotion. She could feel the music flowing through her, telling a story that words could not capture. As she continued, the melody became stronger, more confident. Her fingers moved with purpose, and the mistakes from before seemed to fade into memory. She could see some students leaning forward, curious and attentive. The laughter from the past no longer mattered. She was in her own world now, where music was the only language, and every note she played was a message straight from her heart. The joy of creating something beautiful, of finally sharing it with others, filled her with a sense of freedom she had never known. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. The audience seemed frozen, processing the music they had just heard. Then slowly applause began, first small and hesitant, then growing louder. The girl smiled, a mix of relief and pride washing over her. She had done it. She had faced her fears, played with all her heart, and shared her passion with others. The applause was not just for her skill, but for her courage, her determination, and her love for music. After the recital, her classmates approached her. Some apologized for laughing before, Others expressed admiration for her talent. She felt a mixture of surprise and joy. It was not about revenge or proving them wrong. It was about the journey she had taken to reach this moment. She realized that persistence and belief in oneself could turn ridicule into respect and fear into confidence. That day, she learned that true passion cannot be silenced, and that even small steps forward can lead to great victories. The day of the recital arrived, and the air in the school was buzzing with excitement and nervous energy. She arrived early, her piano book clutched tightly in her hands, her stomach twisted with nervous anticipation, but her mind reminded her of all the practice she had done. She had rehearsed every note, every pause, and every chord hundreds of times. Today, she was ready to share the music that had been growing inside her for months. Walking into the auditorium, she saw her classmates chatting and laughing, some whispering about who would perform best. A few who had laughed at her before shot glances in her direction, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. She felt a flicker of nerves but reminded herself that their opinions did not define her. Her music was her story, and this was her moment to tell it. The stage was set with a grand piano gleaming under the bright lights. She approached it carefully, her fingers brushing over the smooth surface of the keys. She felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. The teacher gave her an encouraging nod, and she took a deep breath, letting the familiar rhythm of her heartbeat guide her. As she sat down on the piano bench, she closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the quiet hours at home when she had practiced alone. This was not about impressing anyone. This was about sharing a part of herself. When the music began, the first notes were soft and tentative. Her fingers moved carefully, but each note carried a sense of emotion and intent. She could hear the whispering in the room fade as her classmates began to listen. Some looked surprised, their previous assumptions about her talent slowly giving way to curiosity. She focused entirely on the melody, feeling each chord resonate through her and letting the music flow naturally from her heart. At first, her hands trembled slightly and she missed a few notes, but instead of panicking, she adjusted and kept going, remembering all the times she had practiced despite mistakes. Every note she played built confidence, and soon her fingers moved with greater fluidity. She noticed that some students who had once whispered and laughed now sat in silence, captivated by the sound. Their expressions were changing, shifting from doubt to amazement. The teacher watched with a proud smile, recognizing the growth in her playing. She had transformed from a hesitant beginner to someone who could carry a melody with feeling and precision. As the music continued, the rhythm became more confident and the melody flowed more smoothly. She felt a sense of joy and freedom, knowing that the music she had nurtured for so long was finally being heard by others. It was as if the piano had become an extension of her, and the notes were words in a language only music could speak. The audience began to notice the transformation. Whispers of admiration replaced the laughter that had once filled her ears. Some students leaned forward, curious about the story she was telling through the piano. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Even the ones who had mocked her before seemed stunned, unable to hide their surprise at the depth of feeling and skill in her playing. The atmosphere in the room shifted, becoming one of respect and awe. She continued with the piece, her fingers dancing across the keys with grace. The notes rose and fell like waves, carrying the emotions she had poured into them. At one point, a particularly difficult passage arrived, one that had taken weeks to master. She played it carefully, feeling a rush of adrenaline as she navigated the complex rhythm. Her heart raced, but her focus was unwavering. Every chord struck with intention, and the music seemed to fill the entire auditorium with warmth and emotion. The recital was not just a performance, it was a journey. She could feel the energy of the audience responding to her music, the silence that followed each phrase speaking volumes. Her classmates, once skeptical, now watched in admiration. A few even whispered to each other, realizing how wrong they had been to doubt her talent. It was a powerful moment, one that showed her the impact of dedication, practice, and the courage to follow her passion. As she played the final notes, there was a brief moment of silence. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the music to conclude. When the last note lingered in the air and finally faded, a wave of applause erupted. The sound was overwhelming, filling her with a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had faced her fears, performed with all her heart, and shared her music with others. The applause was not just for her skill, but for the bravery and dedication she had shown. She looked up at the audience, catching the eyes of her classmates who had laughed at her before. Their expressions had softened, replaced by respect and admiration. Some even smiled at her, acknowledging the courage it took to stand up and play despite past ridicule. She realized that this was the moment she had been working toward, the moment when her music spoke louder than words ever could. After the performance, she stepped down from the stage, her hand still trembling slightly. Her teacher approached, placing a hand on her shoulder and praising her effort. "You played beautifully," they said. "Your dedication shows in every note." The words warmed her heart and reinforced the lesson she had learned. Hard work, persistence, and passion could overcome doubt and fear. Back in the classroom, a few students approached her, offering compliments and expressing admiration for her performance. She felt a mixture of pride and humility, grateful for the recognition but also aware that her journey was just beginning. She realized that the laughter from before was no longer important. What mattered was the connection she had made with the music and the people who had listened. That night, she returned home and sat at her piano once more. She played the same piece from the recital, this time with even more confidence and feeling. The memory of the audience and the applause stayed with her, but the music was hers alone. She explored new melodies and experimented with rhythms, discovering the endless possibilities that the piano offered. Each note was a step forward, a way to express herself and grow as a musician. Her parents watched quietly from the doorway, proud of her determination and courage. They saw the joy that music brought her and knew that this was just the beginning of her journey. The experience of performing, facing fear, and earning respect had given her a sense of strength and confidence that would stay with her for years to come. She had learned that true talent and passion could not be silenced by laughter or doubt. In the days that followed, her confidence grew. She continued to practice diligently, setting new goals and challenging herself with more complex pieces. Her classmates, who had once doubted her, now treated her with respect. Some even sought her advice on music, curious to learn from someone they had underestimated. The girl realized that her dedication and love for music had changed not only her own life but also the perception of those around her. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the nervous girl who struggled with simple notes to the confident performer who captivated her audience, the path had been filled with challenges and small victories. She understood now that every mistake was an opportunity to learn, and every moment of doubt was a chance to grow stronger. Music had taught her patience, resilience, and the power of expressing oneself with honesty and passion. As she prepared for future performances, she carried with her the memory of that first recital. The fear, the laughter, and the eventual applause had shaped her into a musician who played not just for others, but for herself. She knew that challenges would come again, but she was ready to face them. Guided by the music that had become a part of her soul, each note was a step forward, each melody a story waiting to be told. And she was eager to continue sharing her journey with the world. The day of the second recital arrived, and she felt a mixture of excitement and calm determination. This time, she had a deeper understanding of herself and her music. She knew the notes, the rhythm, and the emotions she wanted to convey. But more importantly, she had learned how to let her heart guide her fingers, to let the piano speak the story she could not put into words. She walked into the auditorium, her hands lightly brushing over the piano keys as she prepared herself for the moment. The audience was larger than the last time, filled with students, teachers, and even parents. She could see familiar faces in the crowd, some smiling with encouragement and others watching curiously. A few of the classmates who had laughed at her before were there as well. This time she did not feel nervous about their judgment. Instead, she felt a quiet determination. She was ready to let her music be the voice that spoke louder than words ever could. As she sat at the piano, she closed her eyes for a moment and let herself breathe. The room grew silent as she began to play. The first notes were gentle, flowing like a soft breeze, carrying a sense of calm and curiosity. Her fingers moved confidently, dancing across the keys with precision and grace. The melody began to take shape, delicate at first, then slowly growing stronger and more expressive. Every note seemed to resonate not only in the room but in the hearts of those listening. The students who had once mocked her found themselves leaning forward, captivated by the sound. They could not believe the transformation before their eyes. The girl who had once struggled with simple melodies was now creating music that told a story, full of emotion and depth. The laughter that had filled the room before had disappeared, replaced by attentive silence. Even the teachers looked on with admiration, impressed by the talent and passion pouring from her fingertips. Her fingers moved faster now, yet with elegance and control. The melody soared, weaving through highs and lows, expressing joy, sadness, hope, and determination all at once. She had discovered a rhythm within herself, a unique style that made the music her own. It was as if the piano had become an extension of her soul, and each note carried a piece of her spirit. The audience was drawn in, feeling the emotion she poured into the music even without understanding every note. The room seemed to fade away as she lost herself in the performance. She was no longer aware of the people watching or the whispers that might have been floating through the air. There was only her, the piano, and the music. She allowed herself to feel each chord, to listen to the rise and fall of the melody, and to let it guide her fingers. Every mistake she might have made in the past had been replaced by confidence and expression. This was not just a recital. It was a moment of pure connection. Some students had tears in their eyes, moved by the emotion in her playing. The once skeptical classmates who had mocked her were now silent, their expressions filled with awe. They could see the dedication, the hours of practice, and the courage it had taken for her to reach this point. The music was speaking for her, telling a story of perseverance, passion, and the triumph of following one's dreams. The power of the melody was undeniable, and it held everyone's attention completely. As she reached the middle of the piece, the music became more intense. The rhythm quickened, and the notes rang out with clarity and strength. Her fingers moved with precision, her confidence evident in every chord. The emotions she had kept bottled inside for so long were now pouring into the performance. She felt a surge of energy, a connection to the piano that made the instrument almost seem alive beneath her hands. She knew that every note, every movement was leaving an imprint on the hearts of those listening. The audience was completely silent now, entranced by the music. Even the teachers who had seen many students perform were clearly moved. The girl felt a sense of joy and fulfillment that she had never experienced before. She realized that this was what she had been striving for. Not applause, not recognition, but the ability to touch people's hearts through her music. She could feel the energy in the room, the way the notes resonated with every person present. The laughter that had once been a shadow over her efforts had vanished completely, replaced by respect and admiration. The climax of the piece arrived, and she played with a blend of power and grace that held the audience spellbound. Her fingers flew across the keys, creating a sound that was both delicate and commanding. The room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of her performance. She felt a deep connection with the music, as if it were speaking directly from her heart to the hearts of everyone listening. It was a moment of pure expression, a culmination of all her practice, determination, and love for music. As the final notes faded into silence, the room remained quiet for a moment, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Then applause erupted, filling the auditorium with sound. It was not just polite clapping. It was genuine, heartfelt appreciation. Students who had once mocked her were now standing, cheering and clapping with amazement. Some were even wiping away tears, moved by the beauty and emotion of her performance. She smiled, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment unlike anything she had known before. She looked around at the audience, noticing the expressions of respect and admiration. Her classmates approached her afterward, offering congratulations and apologies for the laughter from before. She felt a mix of surprise, gratitude, and humility. It was not about revenge or proving them wrong. It was about sharing her passion and letting her music be heard. The transformation in the audience, from doubt and ridicule to awe and admiration, was more rewarding than any award or praise she could have received. Her teacher approached, beaming with pride. "You played beautifully," they said. "You allowed the music to speak, and everyone could feel it. You should be very proud of yourself." Their words warmed her heart, reinforcing the lesson she had learned. Courage, persistence, and passion could overcome doubt and fear. The experience had not only shown her talent, but had also revealed the power of music to connect with people on a deep emotional level. Later that evening, she returned home and sat at her piano once more. The memories of the recital lingered, and she replayed the piece she had performed, feeling the emotions even more vividly now. She experimented with new variations and melodies, exploring different expressions and styles. Music had become more than a skill. It was a language she understood intimately, a way to share her thoughts, feelings, and stories with the world. She felt a sense of freedom and joy, knowing that her talent had grown and that her journey was only beginning. Her parents watched from the doorway, proud of her courage, determination, and growth. They had seen the transformation from the shy girl who struggled with the first notes to a confident performer who could touch the hearts of many. They understood that this journey had taught her valuable lessons about perseverance, self-belief, and the importance of pursuing one's passion, regardless of obstacles or judgment from others. In the days that followed, the impact of her performance was evident. Her classmates treated her with newfound respect, some even seeking advice on music. Teachers encouraged her to continue performing and developing her skills. The girl realized that the journey of learning, practicing, and sharing her music had changed not only herself, but also the way others saw her. She had discovered that talent, when paired with dedication and courage, could transform doubt into admiration and silence criticism. She reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the nervous girl who had first struggled to play simple notes, to the confident young musician who had captivated an entire audience, the path had been filled with challenges and small victories. She understood now that each mistake had been an opportunity to grow, and each moment of doubt had been a chance to develop resilience. Music had taught her patience, courage, and the power of self-expression. The experience had shown her that true talent could not be silenced, and that passion and dedication could inspire others, turning skepticism into respect and admiration. After the unforgettable recital, she felt a quiet sense of pride and satisfaction that she had never known before. The applause, the admiration of her classmates, and the heartfelt congratulations from teachers had left a lasting impression on her. She realized that this journey was about more than playing music. It was about persistence, courage, and believing in herself. That evening, she sat at the piano at home, reflecting on everything she had experienced, replaying the music in her mind and fingers, and feeling a deep connection to each note. Her parents watched her silently, feeling proud and happy to see their child embrace her passion so fully. They remembered the early days, when she had struggled to press the right keys and faced laughter from others. The growth they now witnessed was remarkable. She was no longer the hesitant girl afraid of being judged. She had become a confident young musician who could communicate through the piano and touch the hearts of those listening. Her parents knew that this experience had built her character as much as it had built her talent. Over the next few weeks, she noticed that her classmates treated her differently. Those who had mocked her before were now more respectful, often acknowledging her skill and dedication. Some even approached her with curiosity, asking for advice on music or expressing admiration for her courage. She realized that actions often speak louder than words. Her persistence, dedication, and willingness to continue despite ridicule had earned her respect. She felt proud, not because she had proven anyone wrong, but because she had stayed true to herself and her passion. At school, she continued to practice whenever she had the chance. The piano became her sanctuary, a place where she could express her emotions and explore her creativity freely. She began experimenting with her own compositions, discovering that the process of creating music was just as fulfilling as performing it. Each new piece was a reflection of her growth, her emotions, and her experiences. She started to share her compositions with her teacher, who encouraged her to develop them further and perform them at school events. One day, her teacher suggested she participate in a larger school competition. The thought of performing in front of a wider audience made her nervous, but she felt ready. She had grown confident in her abilities and knew that her music could communicate feelings that words sometimes could not. She accepted the challenge, viewing it as an opportunity to continue learning and growing as a musician. She began preparing meticulously, combining technical skill with emotional expression, determined to give her best performance. Her practice sessions became longer and more focused. She experimented with different tempos, dynamics, and expressions, striving to create music that would resonate with her audience. She spent hours perfecting each piece, but she also allowed herself to enjoy the process, remembering why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a companion, a way to share her inner world with others. With each practice, she felt a sense of fulfillment that made the challenges and hard work worthwhile. As the day of the competition approached, she felt a mixture of excitement and calm determination. She reminded herself of the first time she had played in front of her classmates, the laughter she had faced, and the journey she had taken to reach this point. She realized that those experiences had shaped her, building resilience, courage, and a deep appreciation for her talent. This competition was another step in her journey, an opportunity to continue sharing her music and connecting with others. On the day of the competition, she entered the hall, taking a moment to observe the audience and the other participants. She felt a wave of anticipation but focused on her music, letting it guide her fingers. As she sat at the piano and began to play, she felt the familiar flow of melody and rhythm. Her fingers moved with confidence, expressing emotions that words could not capture. Each note was deliberate, each chord filled with feeling, and the music carried her story to everyone listening. The audience was captivated. Her classmates, teachers, and even strangers in the room were drawn into the music, experiencing the emotions she conveyed through her playing. Some smiled, some closed their eyes, and some were visibly moved. She felt a sense of connection with everyone present, understanding that music had the power to transcend differences and touch hearts. The nervousness she had once felt before performances had transformed into focus and joy, and she embraced every moment of it. As she finished her performance, the hall erupted in applause. The sound was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. She felt a rush of happiness and accomplishment, knowing that her dedication and love for music had created an experience that resonated with others. Her classmates approached her, offering congratulations and admiration. She smiled, realizing that the journey was not about competition or winning, but about expressing herself and connecting with others through her talent. After the competition, she spent time reflecting on how far she had come. She remembered the early days of practicing alone at home, the laughter of classmates, the first recital, and the growing confidence she had built with each step. She realized that the most important lesson she had learned was that passion, dedication, and courage could overcome fear and doubt. Music had taught her patience, resilience, and self-expression, and she understood that these lessons would stay with her for life. Her parents and teacher continued to support and encourage her. They recognized that her talent was extraordinary, but even more impressive was her character, the determination, discipline, and courage she had shown. They encouraged her to pursue her dreams, to continue learning, and to keep sharing her music with others. With their support, she felt a renewed sense of purpose and motivation to continue growing as a musician. In the months that followed, she began performing more regularly, both in school events and in small community gatherings. Each performance brought new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to connect with her audience. She experimented with different styles of music, learned new pieces, and even started to compose her own music. Her confidence grew with every performance, and she found joy not only in the music itself, but in the way it could inspire and move others. The journey that had begun with laughter and doubt had transformed into a story of triumph and inspiration. She understood now that challenges and criticism were part of growth, and that true courage meant continuing despite fear. Music had become her voice, her refuge, and her way to make a positive impact on those around her. She was proud, not only of her talent, but of the person she had become, a determined, passionate, and resilient young musician. She reflected on the entire journey, realizing that every obstacle had been a stepping stone, every mistake an opportunity to learn, and every moment of doubt a chance to build strength. The laughter she had faced in the beginning had taught her resilience, and the applause and admiration she received later had shown her the value of perseverance. She knew that her journey in music was only beginning, and she felt excitement for all the experiences, performances, and growth that lay ahead. In quiet moments at home, she continued to play the piano, exploring new melodies, refining her technique, and creating music that reflected her experiences and emotions. She understood that music was a lifelong journey, one that required dedication, patience, and passion. The joy she felt when playing was unmatched, and she knew that no laughter, doubt, or obstacle could ever take that away from her. Her music had become a part of her identity, a source of confidence and a way to connect with the world. Looking back, she realized that the journey had been more than learning to play the piano. It had been a journey of self-discovery, courage, and resilience. She had learned to face fear, to embrace challenges, and to express herself with honesty and passion. The girl who had once been laughed at for trying to play the piano had grown into a confident musician, admired not only for her talent, but also for her perseverance and courage. She knew that her music would continue to grow, and she felt eager to share it with the world, one note at a time.